Hello everyone, it's Shannon for Waffle Flower Crafts. Today I'm going to create a background by inlaying heat embossed die cuts. I'm going to be using these Waffle Flower products today. This new stamp set that came out on our fall release, it's called Hello Fall. I'm going to be using some of the leaf images from this set, and I'm going to use those outline leaves as opposed to the more solid leaf images. I'll also be using the matching die sets. This is the Hello Fall matching die. And then for my second card, which is a bonus card, I'm going to be using this die, which is called 7 Skeins Floss Bobbin. I'm going to start with an A2 panel of 110-pound craft paper, or craft cardstock, that I trimmed down to 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. And I pulled 4 leaf dies from the Hello Fall matching die set, and I'm going to die cut them out of this panel. And I will repeat these die cutting these 4 leaves till the entire panel is cut with these leaves. So the entire panel is cut, and I did save all of the craft leaves that are the negative image. So I did save all those. And I'm going to use those to create my bonus card. Now I'm going to move on to some colored cardstocks. I have 5 fall colors: a mustard yellow, an orange, 2 purples, and a red. I'm going to stamp the 4 leaf images that correspond with the dies that I just used on each one of those colored cardstocks. So I'm just pointing out those leaves I'm using. I've already mounted them in my MISTI here along the edge. And then I'm going to pull over my first scrap. Start with this mustard yellow. I made sure that I have my stamps positioned in such a way that they'll fit on each one of my scraps, so I don't have to reposition those 4 stamps for this different scraps of cardstock. Now I put down some anti-static powder because I will be heat embossing these images, and I'm inking up the stamps with Versamark ink. Stamp them down, and then I will pour on some gold embossing powder and then heat set these with my heat gun. And I will repeat this process for each one of the colored cardstocks. And now I'm moving on to the orange cardstock. So I went ahead and jumped to, I've already finished stamping the leaves on each one of my colored cardstocks. And now I'm going to die cut these leaves out. Start with this purple. I'm going to use the matching dies, so I'm going to pull off those same 4 leaves that I used earlier on the craft panel, position them over the stamped image, and use some painter's tape to hold the die in place while I run it through the machine. So I repeated that process for all the different colors of cardstock. And now I have my craft panel. I'm flipping it over. So now the back side is facing me. And then I'm going to start to inlay these leaves. I've got some washi tape to hold them in place, but first I'm going to arrange all these leaves. I'm trying to avoid 2 of the same color right next to each other. So I'm going to arrange them first, and then I'll use the washi tape to hold them in place. And I am flipping these leaves over because, again, the front of the panel is facing down into my craft mat, and I want the embossed image to be facing down as well. So I've just finished arranging all my leaves, and now I'm going to start to hold them in place with strips of washi tape. You just want to make sure the washi tape is on the leaf as well as on the backside of the panel, and that will make sure it holds it in place. Just finishing this last leaf here, and then I'll be able to flip this panel and see the end result. There we go. So I really like the different colored cardstocks with that little bit of shine from the stamped image. I cut some craft foam to fit behind the panel. This is just going to add some dimension. I'm going to adhere it with some Tombow Mono multi-liquid adhesive. So I'm going to flip over this panel here, apply the glue, and then I'll stick the craft foam sheet down. And again, this will just add some dimension to the finished card. And I'll set this aside to dry while I work on the sentiment. I'm going to use the platform from my die cutting machine to kind of weight it down while it dries. That's not absolutely necessary, but this just ensures that it dries nice and flat. So I've already have mounted my Misty, the sentiment, which is again from the Hello Fall stamp set. I'm going to stamp it on a scrap of craft cardstock, but I will be embossing this. So I'm going to use some anti-static powder first before I stamp, just to avoid any of that powder sticking to anything besides the stamped image. I'm going to ink up the sentiment with Versamark ink, stamp it down, and then I will pour on some gold embossing powder, tap off the excess, and then heat set this with my heat gun. I'm going to die cut this out with the matching die. So I went ahead and die cut the sentiment out, and my panel is now dry, so I'm ready to now kind of put everything together. I'm going to adhere my panel down onto an A2 top folding craft card base with the Tombow glue again. Add it to the back side of that craft foam and then adhere the panel down. And I want to add a little bit more dimension to the sentiment, so I'm going to put this card and panel aside to dry and put some foam tape on the back side of my sentiment. So I'm just cutting strips of this foam tape, and I'm just going to add it to the back of this sentiment. And just add the final little bit of dimension. It'll help that sentiment to kind of stand out from the background a little bit. So I've already added all the foam tape to the back and removed the backing from the foam tape, and so now all I have to do is stick this down onto the card. I'm just going to place it at the lower right corner of the card. And there we go. And that card is done. Now I have one more card that I'm going to show you guys today. I wanted to use those scraps, those leaves that I die cut from the very first panel. I wanted to use those leaves and make a bonus card. I won't be doing inlay die cutting for this, but I wanted to show you another fun trick, which is how to stamp die cuts. So these leaves are typically people stamp first and then die cut, but every once in a while it makes more sense, especially if you're going to be stamping multiples of the same image, to die cut first and then stamp on the die cut. I could have done this for the leaves that I stamped in the very beginning on the different colored cardstocks, but then I would have to emboss, heat set each one of those little leaves, and that would be tricky, pouring on the powder and then trying to not burn myself while I'm heat setting each one of those teeny tiny leaves. So I chose to stamp them first and then die cut them. But for these leaves, since I've already die cut them out of the panel and I still wanted to add a stamp image, I went ahead and die cut the leaves again out of a sturdy cardstock. So it's 110-pound white cardstock, and I'm going to use that kind of like a template to hold those leaves in place. So I popped those leaves in place. I used the negative space to help me position the matching stamp, and now I'm ready to stamp these leaves with the image. And I have several of these leaves, these 4 leaves. If you remember, we stamped these 4 leaves repeatedly to create our background. And I want to stamp each one of these leaves, so all I have to do to stamp multiple of these leaves is pop out the ones that I've stamped and put in the new leaves in that negative space and then stamp again. So I went ahead and repeated that process and stamped all these leaves. And this is what, if you've ever taken a card class before, most of the kits were prepped this way. So this is a great way for stamping multiple images, multiples of the same image, I should say. So I have all my leaves done, and I did stamp these in the Versamark ink, so they just have like a nice muted line. You can still see them, but it's just a little bit darker, so it's tone on tone look. And now I'm going to take that die, which is called 7 Skeins, floss bobbin die, and I'm going to take the cross stitch, at least it looks like cross stitch or little X's, And I'm going to place that strip along the edges of a A2 panel of kind of maroon cardstock. Run it through my die cutting machine, and this is going to add a little beautiful cross stitch X border to the edge of my panel. And I'll hold it up here so you can see to the camera. Really pretty little detail. I really love this die set for adding these little bit of details. There's 4 or 5 other dies that you could use in this set to add a little detail to the edge of your panel. So I really like the versatility of this set. In addition to the skeins that you can use to store your embroidery thread or ribbon even, or even washi tape. I've seen people do it with washi tape as well. So I went ahead and did the other side, so I have that little beautiful detail on both sides of the panel. Now I'm going to start to arrange these leaves. So these are the leaves that I stamped with the Versamark ink, so it's tone on tone. So very muted, but very pretty, I think, with that maroon cardstock. It kind of has a similar hue. I'm just going to kind of arrange them almost in a wreath-like, kind of have I'm going to leave the center open for my sentiment, but I'm going to arrange them around the center. And I didn't have to die cut any extra leaves. These are all just the leaves left over from die cutting that very first panel. So I got them all arranged here. I did stamp and die cut a sentiment earlier when I had it set up for my craft sentiment that I stamped for the first card. And I die cut because this maroon cardstock is just a little thin weight, I die cut some of that 110 pound craft cardstock, and I'm now adhering it to the backside of that gold sentiment that I stamped on the maroon cardstock. And I'm just using this to kind of help me position and make sure those leaves, I have enough space there for my sentiment. And now I'm going to start to adhere these down. So I'm just going to pick up each one of these leaves and adhere them down. So I'm going to jump ahead here to the last leaf. I did switch to my fine tip nozzled glue because these leaves are really, because of the stem, they have some tiny spots, and that was just a little bit easier for me to control the glue. And plus the glue I have inside is matte finish, so if I do get any glue going beyond the leaf, it'll dry matte, so it won't be shiny, so you won't notice that adhesive. So now I'm just going to cut some more foam tape, and just like I did for the first sentiment, I'm going to add some foam tape on the back side of this sentiment as well, just to add a little bit more dimension to this card. I'm removing the backs, and before I'll stick this down, I do want to adhere this panel down onto an A2 top folding craft card base. Just lining it up here, make sure it fits. And I'm going to use my Tombow Mono Multi-Liquid Adhesive again. This allows me to have a little bit of give as opposed to craft tape, or a tape runner. I can kind of reposition it if I need to. I can kind of slide and wiggle it into place if it's not quite centered on the first time that I lay it down. And now I'm going to take my sentiment, and just center it and then stick it down. And again, I've already removed the foam backing on these. But I did notice that I have a little bit of craft foam sticking out. You can kind of see it, so I'm going to trim that down a little bit. Some of that craft tape, that foam tape. Trim it down so you can't see it from the front. And then I'll stick that down. And that card is done too. So that's my bonus card that I made with the scraps from the first panel. I like how clean and simple it is, and you have that little bit of shine from the embossed sentiment. And I'll bring in the first card here so you can see again the really pretty colors from the different colored cardstock, and that really beautiful embossed image on the leaves really sets this off. So I hope you guys enjoyed my video today. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to spend some time with me and watch my technique. I hope you have a wonderful day, and if you want any more information on the products I use, please visit waffleflower.com, and you can find more creative ideas if you follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube. Thank you for watching.